the 33rd day of the counting. The 33rd day is known in Israel famously as Lag Ba'omer. Lag is 33, 33rd day of the Omer, and that's when everybody goes to the gravesite of the famous sage, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and they pray there, and they dance, and they celebrate, and it's really an amazing event. He was one of the greatest of the sages. He wrote the Zohar, so he opened the secrets of Torah for the masses, although at that time it wasn't really for the masses, it was just available. But it was the beginning. So his teachings are celebrated intensely with bonfires and people camping out all night. It's a beautiful event. Each day of the counting of the Omer represents a certain emotional quality. The 33rd day of the Omer represents the quality of the emotion called Hod. In Hebrew, Hod means glory. It also is related to the word for thanks or for acknowledgement, like Hoda'ah, Modeh Ani. This quality is the humility in the emotions where I can actually put someone else before myself. There is the quality called Netzach, which is where you can put fact before yourself. Gotta do what you gotta do. If something has to happen, it has to happen. You gotta do it. You feel like it, you're in the mood, you're not in the mood, but you gotta do it. That's the beginning of the humble emotions. The exciting emotions like love and hate and compassion, where all the drama takes place, all the excited, inspired emotions, 3 of them, they don't have a lot of humility to them. When I love, that's serious. Nothing humble about it. And when I hate, and there's nothing. And even my compassion. It's a powerful, overwhelming feeling. And it's hard to be humble about it. It's hard to put it aside in favor of some other benefit. The other 3 emotions, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod, those are more humble emotions. There is a kindness that is humble. It's not as inspired, it's not as exciting, not going to write novels about it or make operas about it, but it's a consistent kindness. A kindness that comes from the conviction, you got to do the right thing. What's right is right. Got to do what you got to do. It's not exciting, but it's steady. And it's also practical. You see, in the excited kindness, which is love, I can have a very strong emotional experience and love you to pieces. But I'm not going to do anything about it because I just love the feeling. Why ruin it by doing you a favor? I just enjoy the love for the sake of love, or hate for the sake of hate. I love hating you, so I'm not going to bother you. I'm not going to do anything. It's the emotion that's exciting. And the same is even true with compassion. Very often people feel a deep compassion. Never occurs to them to do anything about it. They'll just walk home, go home feeling so compassionate. Of course, that's not right, but that's natural. So if a person says, if you loved me, you would have taken care of the issue or the problem, you would have done something. Not necessarily true. The fact that you don't do anything doesn't mean you don't love. Love is not a behavior, love is an emotion. It should be followed with a behavior. It should, but it is not the nature of love to become an action. It's an emotion. When you do something for someone you love, the love sweetens the action. But it doesn't necessarily bring the action. Whereas netzach, gotta do what you gotta do, person needs a favor, person needs a little support, a little loving, tender care, netzach will make it happen. Because you gotta do what you gotta do. And that's humble because you're letting something other than your own excitement dictate your behavior. And there are people who are really good at that. They're always there when you need them. They're not the most romantic. They don't have powerful emotions, but they seem to show up wherever a favor is needed. They're always there. And they do what you got to do and they go home, and it's no big deal. Like firemen. So that's the humility of it. The humility is I can be motivated, I can be obedient to fact, reality. Whereas a person who's indulgent, I enjoy the feeling, I enjoy the experience, but don't tell me what to do. Now comes the emotion that we're talking about tonight, and that is hod, which is acknowledgement. And it's glorious. It's beautiful, magnificent, and yet humble. Acknowledgement means when you're right, you're right. It's not just when it's right. What's right? Like, for example, the country has to go to war. The tribe, the family, you got to go to war. You got to defend the city. Of course, you don't want to, you don't love it, but you do what you got to do. So you're ready to go and serve and protect like a good Marine. But then you find out that your neighbor is not going. You say, whoa, 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 wait a minute. If I have to go, you got to go too. I should go to war while you sit here safely at home? I don't like that deal. See, that's already too humble. Hod means I love for you to stay home. Let me go. You be safe. Like every man does for his family. I'll go to war. You stay safe. In other words, in simple language, we could say that there's the humility that allows me to admit that I'm wrong, and there's a humility that allows me to admit that you are right. Very different. Very different. There are people who can easily admit that they're wrong because, What's wrong is wrong, what's right is right. But it is so hard for them to admit that you're right, even while they're admitting that they're wrong. I'm sure you've seen this. You have an argument with somebody, and it turns out that you're wrong in your argument. Well, doesn't that mean that your opponent is right? No, he's never right. I was wrong, I made a mistake, but he's even more wrong than me. So there are people who can admit that they're wrong, but they cannot give credit to someone who is right. So these two humilities are represented physiologically by the legs, the right leg and the left leg. The right leg is the strength, the firmness, the security behind or under the right arm. So it gives your body stability on the right side, and Hod gives your body stability on the left side. On the right side is the ability to admit I'm wrong, to do what I have to do, because you got to do what you got to do. And the left side is the ability to admit that someone else is right, and they have more right than me. They should stay home and be safe while I go and fight the battles. If I have a sandwich and we're both hungry, you should have the sandwich. I'll manage. I'll be okay. But you should not be hungry. That comes from Hod. Modesty dictates that these two things should never be separated. It's not right to have one without the other. And that's why when we pray, we should stand with our legs together as if it was one leg. That's, first of all, a symbol of humility, and secondly, a symbol of modesty. Now, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai passed away on this day, the 33rd day of the Omer, which is the essence of this attribute of Hod. It is Hod within Hod, the glory of glory. Essential, undiluted humility and acknowledgement. Acknowledgement means I acknowledge your significance. That's what it means when you give someone credit. Like Rabbi Akiva said to his students, all that I have learned and all that I have taught is to the credit of my wife. She told me to go to yeshiva. She urged me, she encouraged me, she demanded that I go and educate myself. So everything that I learned from there on is all to her credit. That's called acknowledgement. And that really is the essence of humility. We're told that Moshe, the guy who split the sea and went up the mountain and brought the 10 Commandments and all of that, he was the most humble person in the world. How is that possible? He speaks to God whenever he wants. Imagine saying to people who came to him with a question, he said, hold on a minute, I'll go talk to God and I'll come right back. You can just talk to God whenever you want. Most prophets couldn't do that. Prophecy came from above. When God wanted to tell the prophet something, he would go into a prophetic ecstasy, and he would hear God. But Moshe, he just spoke to God like you speak to a neighbor. He was the most humble. But did he have no idea how superior he was? He knew very well. He knew exactly what his strengths were, what his amazing achievements were. And yet he was the most humble. How did he get to be humble? We're told. His humility came by looking at the simple people, the most simple, who never stood at Mount Sinai, whose father was not Amram, the head of the nation, the head of the Jewish people in his time. And his mother was not Yocheved, who was herself a prophet. And he wasn't born with the gifts that Moshe was born with. Just a simple guy who maybe doesn't understand all the significance, the meaning, the beauty, the power of the words of the Torah. And yet, Shabbos, he keeps Shabbos. During the week, he puts on tefillin. Before he eats, he makes a bracha. He makes sure that the food is kosher. What is he doing? He is being what God wants him to be, without any of the gifts, without any of the advantages that Moshe had. So what did Moshe do? He simply acknowledged that his service of God was a gift. He attributed all his accomplishments to the fact that he was his father's son, to the fact that he had seen God at the burning bush. He spoke to God on top of the mountain. After that, of course, you're going to obey God and serve him. So Moshe thought, out of humility, that had he not had all of those gifts, all of those advantages, all of those experiences, if he was just a simple Jew, maybe he wouldn't do as well as the simple guy. Well, we know that he would, but there is at least a realistic possibility. And that's what humility ends up meaning. When there are two possibilities, one is more self-congratulating and the other is less self-congratulating, you assume the lesser one. But it's got to be realistic. It can't be the smartest guy in town thinks he's dumb. That's dumb. That's just denying reality. That's not humility. Humility means a realistic, humble thought. Moshe says, if I wasn't gifted, if I didn't have this special soul, if I wasn't destined for this role, and I was just the average person, I don't know if I would do as well as the average person. Is that possible? Yes, it's possible, because we know that he would probably be a great simple person. He would still be in tune with God's will. But that was his humility. So humility comes from acknowledgement. He attributed his abilities and his success and his achievements to God-given talents. Like Rabbi Akiva attributed all of his achievement to his wife. If you want to get really mystical about it, Rabbi Akiva, who was one of the sages of the Mishnah, was a reincarnation of Moshe. You see, most of the Talmud, most of the Mishnah, most of the oral law we have forever recorded for all time to come, thanks to Rabbi Akiva. He was the sage of all sages. Most sages are his students. So he brought the oral Torah to the masses, just like Moshe brought the written Torah to the masses. And it was the same soul. And so they had that same quality. They attributed their success to someone else. And that was their humility. And Shimon Bar Yochai, whose yahrzeit is this Friday, this year, he had that quality in steroids. He had the hod of the hod, acknowledgement of acknowledgement, humility of humility. It is said of him, this is really kind of interesting, as long as he was in this world, from the moment he was born to the moment he passed away, there was never a sighting of a rainbow. The rainbow did not appear in the lifetime of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Why? The rainbow is there as a reminder to God not to bring a flood again, no matter how bad the people are. But with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the world, there was no reminder necessary. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, his presence prevented any such occurrence without recourse or without having to rely on the promise that God made to Noah. If we could understand the Zohar, which he wrote, we would understand his greatness. For unfortunately, it's very hard to understand the Zohar. It's written for very delicate souls. So there's no explanation, there's no discussion, there's no elaboration. It's just these holy mystical facts, insights. So we can appreciate some of it. It's inspiring in some way. But to say that we actually understand it, not really. But that was Rabbi Shimon. So here's a story now. Kind of a mystical story. There was one year where the Rebbe asked the Chassidim in Israel to reach out to all the soldiers in the front lines and bring each of the soldiers a letter, a copy of a letter that the Rebbe wrote to them, plus I'm not sure, something to eat, some special food. So 6 young men went up to a certain forward position where civilians are not allowed. But Chabad has, for all the years in Israel, the Lubavitch Hasidim are welcome to all of these secret places, all of these forward positions to inspire the soldiers. They come, they sing, they tell them something about Judaism, they put on tefillin, they celebrate. Because these soldiers, after all is said and done, All of these soldiers on the front lines, on the forward positions in Israel, they're teenagers. They're babies. So they need a little inspiration, a little joy. Anyway, these 6 guys arrive at this forward position, and the man in charge, the commander there, says, I can't let you go. There was some event, there was some incident, there's some tension going on, and I can't. They said, the Rebbe told us to do this. He said, I always allow it, but not today. It's too dangerous. And they said, but the Rebbe must know what's going on, and he feels that we should do this, and maybe that's why we should do it. If there's more tension and there's more danger, then the soldiers need more inspiration and morale boost. The commander said, look, if one of my soldiers gets hurt, I can't sleep for a week. If I let you go and you get hurt, I won't be able to sleep for a year. I can't do it. They argued and argued and argued, and he wouldn't budge. So they turned away. But instead of going back home, they went around and about and got to the forward position without the commander knowing. The man in charge at the forward position assumed that they were cleared, as usual. And so he, of course, allowed the celebration, and they read the Rebbe's letter to each of the soldiers, and it was wonderful. It was Lag Ba'omer. Now, when they finished, they tried to sneak back out along the same path that they came. But the commander there, who had forbidden them to go, caught them. He was furious, and he let them know it. But after he had vented all of his disapproval, he calmed down and he said, you guys are all right. If my soldiers would listen to me the way you listen to the Rebbe, we would have a really, really great army. So kol hakavod, hats off to you. Don't ever do that again. So now they're on their way home to Kfar Chabad, and they have to take a bus, part of the journey. So they're sitting on the bus, it's empty. The bus driver, who is not an observant or religious Jew, is wondering, these religious guys should all be in Meron at the gravesite of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because it is Lag Ba'omer. And he knows that all the religious people go there to celebrate. So he said to these 6 young men, how come you're not in Meron? It's Lag Ba'omer. So they told him exactly what had happened and how great it was that the soldiers felt inspired and cared for, and the Rebbe was thinking about them, and it was wonderful. And the bus driver made a fantastic comment, an amazing insight. He said, you know what I think? I think all those people who went to the gravesite of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai to celebrate his yahrzeit, I think Reb Shimon Bar Yochai himself was with you at the front line. We have a Sunday night program for VIPs that you might be interested in. It's informal, it's questions and answers, it's conversation. It's really relaxed, it's really pleasant, enjoyable, informative, and kind of community-like. It's a Sunday night program. There's a Wednesday morning program for the VIPs. and there's a Wednesday night program. All of it just conversation, casual, laid back, unscripted. So join us, take a look, click the link below and see which of the three suits you best, and join us for some enjoyable conversation.